Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the icy wilds of 18th century Norway, a land of thick pine forests, frozen lakes, and enough snow to make your eyelids feel heavy just hearing about it. You're standing at the edge of a tiny village, somewhere north of the 60th parallel, where everything smells faintly of pine tar and yesterday's fish stew. It's still dark because the sun doesn't really bother to rise until mid-morning this far north in winter. You stamp your feet to stay warm, clutching your wool-lined mittens, and glance over at a handful of rugged men tightening their leather boots and checking over long wooden skis. These aren't adventurers or soldiers. Nope, these are postal workers. And in this sleepy outpost, the mail doesn't go out by carriage or by pigeon. It goes out on skis. Every week, often more, some poor soul straps a clinking leather satchel to his back, grabs two poles made from shaved pine, and glides, if you can call frantic snow-hopping gliding, across miles of frozen terrain just to deliver someone's overdue invoice for dried herring. You probably wouldn't survive this, let's be honest. Between the temperatures, the wolves, and the deep commitment to salted meats, most of us would tap out before noon. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see who's drifting off from where tonight. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow the sound of wooden skis scraping over snow as the first mailman sets off, his breath puffing in slow clouds. This village, tucked into a fjord like a forgotten bookmark, has no roads in or out during the winter. Everything, grain, gossip, and government decrees, comes and goes on skis. And while the job might seem a bit cozy Nordic rustic from a distance, the reality is that it's somewhere between a survival sport and a long, cold walk of bureaucratic endurance. The early postmen weren't government employees exactly, more like freelance, frostbitten runners. If you lived in a remote area, it might be your official duty as a farmer to carry mail between towns. No training, no pension, just a sturdy pair of calves and the hope that you'd come back without a moose bite. By the late 1600s, Norway had started to formalize the system, but even by the 18th century, large parts of the route still depended on individuals, sometimes whole families, who were just willing to suffer. One mainstream fact you might enjoy slipping into your pillow: Norway was part of a union with Denmark at this time. The central government in Copenhagen had an unfortunate fondness for sending updates, reports, and lists of rules through these remote postal networks. So imagine skiing for 3 days to deliver an official letter stating, "Please collect more taxes." Truly the stuff of national morale. You trudge along behind the skier, watching as he crosses a frozen lake, skis cutting crisp lines into the snow. There's no trail, just instinct and memory. And the mailbag? Surprisingly heavy. It's made of leather, oiled for waterproofing, and packed tight with everything from parish notices to court summonses. If he drops it in a snowbank, well, there's a good chance some poor goat herder won't hear about his cousin's funeral until Easter. The snow is silent, save for the gentle creak of leather and wood. Your breath comes out in slow, sleepy clouds. In the distance, you spot another skier coming the opposite direction. Maybe a handoff, or maybe just a neighbor trying to get his boots resoled in the next town. Quirky detail time: some of the earliest ski mail routes required the postman to sign a kind of snow log when they passed through checkpoints. In areas without officials, they'd carve a symbol into a tree or leave a marked stone. That's right, you're basically signing into work by stabbing a pine. Historians still argue whether the earliest ski postmen invented specific ski techniques that modern skiers later adapted, or if they were just winging it and trying not to fall face first into a snowdrift. The Norwegian diagonal stride, a cross-country ski move, may have roots in these early postal routes. Or it may just be that when you're carrying 20 pounds of paper over a mountain, you naturally figure out a few efficient ways to stay vertical. You pause at a hillside overlook. The skier ahead stops too, adjusts the satchel on his back, and pulls out a scrap of dried reindeer meat to chew. No sandwich, no thermos of soup, just salted sinew and the knowledge that he has about 40 kilometers to go before he gets to sleep indoors again. He scratches something into a birch tree, probably just his initials and the date, and pushes off again, disappearing between the pines. You follow slowly, your imaginary skis gliding with him deeper into a landscape that's white, endless, and somehow comforting in its quiet. A raven flies overhead. Somewhere behind you, a wooden door creaks as the next mailman steps out of the village post station, ready to begin his route. The rhythm of this work never stops, even when the snow piles 5 feet deep and the wind sings lullabies in the trees. You breathe deeply. The cold air is dry and pure, and there's something soothing about how much it doesn't care about you. You're just another traveler, passing through, like the postman, like the messages, like time itself, floating silently across the snow.
Section 2. You keep moving, skis whispering over the snow as dawn begins its slow crawl across the horizon. The sky changes from black to deep gray to a soft, steely blue, the kind of light that never quite becomes daylight in winter, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's been dusted with sleep. Ahead, the trees begin to thin, revealing a narrow valley where a small cluster of wooden buildings hugs the shoreline of a half-frozen river. There's no road here, only a well-worn ski trail cutting between the cabins. You pass a bundled-up grandmother tossing grain to her chickens. Yes, even in the frost-choked dead of winter, the chickens expect breakfast. Before the mailbag became an icy burden on strong shoulders, Norway's postal system had one major problem: geography. In a country stretched vertically across mountains, fjords, and endless pine forests, travel was never simple. Sure, you had boats in summer, but in winter, with most rivers frozen and mountain passes buried in snow, Norway essentially became a patchwork of snow islands. Early in the 18th century, most inland villages weren't connected by roads at all. If you lived in the north, anywhere above Trondheim really, you could pretty much count on being unreachable for half the year. Except for one stubborn little miracle: ski postmen. You push forward along the trail, imagining what it was like to be one of the first. These weren't athletes or military scouts. They were farmers, fishermen, woodsmen, people who knew the terrain intimately, every hidden path, every frozen stream that cracked a little too early in spring. The government leaned heavily on local knowledge and local labor. Sometimes entire communities were responsible for a single leg of a postal journey. You'd ski 20 miles, hand off the satchel to your neighbor, and hope he didn't immediately fall into a snowbank. Mainstream fact incoming. By 1758, the Danish-Norwegian Postal Service had created official winter post routes, covering over 1,000 kilometers. That's longer than the entire length of Italy, and it was all done on skis, sleds, or on rare, optimistic occasions, on foot. It wasn't exactly Amazon Prime, but hey, if you mailed a letter from Oslo to Tromsø in January, there was a chance someone would actually receive it by April. One village you pass looks completely deserted, windows shuttered, smoke rising lazily from just one chimney. The trail curves around it, hugging the side of a snowy hill. You can almost hear the crunch of your own skis as you climb. That's when you remember. Most of these early routes weren't mapped. No GPS, no trail markers. Navigation relied entirely on memory and landmarks, which were often covered in snow. Historians still argue whether early ski postmen carried compasses or simply relied on the stars and tree formations to guide them. Some records mention crude maps sketched onto birch bark. Others suggest they simply memorized the number of hills between villages. If you passed one too many spruce groves, you'd know you were off course, and probably in some troll's backyard. As you round a bend, a gust of wind slices across your face like a cold slap. The mailman ahead stops, shielding his eyes. Below, in a narrow ravine, lies a makeshift bridge, just two logs tied together with rope. A necessary crossing, but one that's more than a little questionable in high winds. You shuffle carefully, skis clacking softly against frozen bark. Quirky tidbit time. In the most remote areas, postmen were known to leave letters tucked inside hollow tree trunks or under specific rocks. These weren't mailboxes so much as "please don't let this get eaten by a fox" boxes. Some were so reliable that locals passed down their locations for generations. You imagine stumbling on one now, a tiny leather pouch stuffed with yellowed papers, smelling faintly of pine and ink. By midday, you've reached a larger village, a regional post station, if you can call a two-room log cabin a station. Inside, it's marginally warmer. A fire crackles in a stone hearth. A woman in woolen skirts brews something in a pot that smells suspiciously like turnips and cloves. The mailman removes his hat, shakes out his beard icicles, and begins sorting. There's a letter with a broken seal. Someone got curious on the trail again. Another envelope is addressed to Herr Olsen, who makes boots. In villages this small, a name was usually enough. You notice one wax-sealed letter bearing the royal crest. Probably something thrilling, like a tax clarification or a law about hay. These stops aren't just for warming up, they're for regrouping. Routes were often so long.
Section 3. The climb begins. Your legs are already starting to feel like overcooked noodles under all the layers of wool and leather, but there's no time for pity. The trail now winds uphill, snaking through pine stands and across snowy ridges where the only sound is the quiet hiss of skis over powder. You lean into the incline, poles digging into the snow like slow metronomes, counting each step toward the summit. Welcome to the life of an 18th century ski postman, an eternal uphill battle, often literally. The use of skis for postal work wasn't just a quirky local trick, it was an official policy. By the mid-1700s, Norway's royal administrators had realized that hoof transport simply wasn't cutting it. Horses were fine in the lowlands, but in the mountains, they'd slip, freeze, or flat-out refuse to move. Dogs and sleds were tried here and there, but nothing beat the speed and versatility of a half-frozen farmer on two long sticks. So skiing became the default winter mode for moving the mail. Ski design back then wasn't quite the sleek fiberglass you might imagine. Early Norwegian skis were handmade from local wood, often pine or birch, and could be anywhere from 7 to 10 feet long. That's like skiing on two cafeteria tables strapped to your boots. And your boots? Wooden soles with leather bindings, which were about as comfy as sleeping in a barrel full of walnuts. As you climb, the snow deepens, swallowing your ankles with every glide. Ahead, the trail flattens out briefly, offering a narrow ledge with a view over the valley you just left. The river below looks like a silver ribbon frozen mid-melt, and the trees cluster together like sleepy green hedgehogs. You pause for a moment, catching your breath. Even with fictional skis, this part's no joke. Mainstream historical fact for the night. Norway is considered the birthplace of modern skiing, and not just for sport. The word ski itself comes from the Old Norse skid, meaning stick of wood. By the 18th century, ski use was already widespread among hunters, soldiers, and of course, postal workers. And these postmen weren't just using skis, they were innovating.
Which brings us to the postal technique known as kicking downhill and shuffling uphill, a method that sounds more like a very tired dance than a sport. Going uphill, postmen had to use a sort of angled herringbone step to gain traction. Downhill, they let gravity do their thing, steering as best they could using one long pole like a rudder. Helmets? Padded vests? Nope, just a strong jawline and the ability to bounce. Quirky detail time. Some ski mail carriers modified one of their skis to be shorter than the other. The shorter ski helped with climbing and braking, while the longer one allowed for smoother gliding. This lopsided setup made skiing look awkward, but it worked, and some regions kept the method well into the 19th century. Picture yourself now, gliding downhill in mismatched skis, clutching a leather bag full of tax forms, all while praying you don't hit a stump. Historians still argue whether these skiing postmen were formally trained, or if each one just figured things out based on local wisdom and trial by snowdrift. Some records suggest that experienced carriers would take on apprentices, passing down secret trails and good weather windows. Others claim these routes were learned solo, in a kind of frosty rite of passage that involved equal parts stubbornness and near hypothermia. You crest the top of the ridge, breath puffing in clouds. There's a small wooden marker here, a carved pole with notches and faded paint. Maybe it marks distance. Maybe it just warns, turn back, the soup's getting cold. The descent begins slowly. The snow on the far side is packed tighter, and the trees grow closer together. You crouch slightly, channeling every ski movie you've ever watched, and push off. The wind bites at your cheeks as you glide downhill, trees whizzing past in a blur of green and white. Somewhere between exhilaration and terror, you start to get the hang of it. Then a squirrel, because of course. You veer left to avoid it, narrowly missing a branch and landing in a forgiving mound of powder. You're fine, just snowy. Your fictional postman companion skis back up to you, shrugs, and says nothing. It's a known hazard of the job: rogue squirrels, startled deer, and occasionally drunk moose. Nothing to do but shake it off, brush the snow from your hood, and keep moving. Down in the next valley, you reach another handoff station. This one's little more than a fire pit and a small shelter, a lean-to with animal pelts flapping in the wind. A boy no older than 15 waits inside, sipping from a steaming tin mug. He nods at your approach and reaches for the mailbag. It's his turn now. Some stations used kids for short, safer legs of the route. It wasn't the best idea, but it was practical. Kids were fast, light, and eager to prove themselves. The boy slings the bag over his shoulder, adjusts his cap, and vanishes into the trees before you can say, "Watch out for squirrels." You linger by the fire, letting your imaginary fingers thaw. Somewhere nearby, a raven caws lazily. The scent of pine and smoked meat fills the air. You think about how each leg of this journey is a link in a long, invisible chain stretching across the country. A letter might pass through a dozen hands before it reaches its destination, and each hand leaves a little of itself behind. The faint trace of sweat on a wax seal, a smudge of coal dust, the faint imprint of a thumb in the paper. And you, too, have left your mark. A small dent in the snow, a warm breath caught in the cold air. A brief, quiet moment in the life of Norway's great postal network, all carried on the backs of ski-bound messengers with frost in their beards and jokes in their pockets. You hear a gust of wind whistle through the trees. Time to move again. There's another hill ahead, another letter waiting to be delivered, and a whole country stitched together with skis, snow, and stubbornness.
Section 4. The trail ahead dips gently into a grove of frost-laced spruce trees, the kind that look like they've been dusted with powdered sugar by a very enthusiastic pastry chef. The hush of the snow is so complete, it almost feels like you're inside a snow globe, one that's been gently shaken, then carefully set down by someone who really respects silence. You follow in the tracks of your fictional postman, who's taken the bag back from the boy and is now gliding along with the determined rhythm of someone who's done this about 500 too many times. And you start to wonder, what exactly is in this heavy, creaky leather satchel that's worth all this effort? Well, tonight's about to get even more thrilling. We're opening the mail.
18th century Norwegian postal bags weren't filled with love letters and royal secrets quite as often as you'd hoped. Most of the time, the contents were soul-numbingly practical. Reports from parishes about livestock populations, tax records, notices about church repairs, and yes, an absurd number of salted fish invoices. Mainstream fact: salted and dried fish, especially cod, was one of Norway's biggest exports during the 18th century. The famous klippfisk, or cliff fish, was salted, dried on coastal rocks, and sent all over Europe. With it came an avalanche of paperwork, permits, receipts, trade authorizations. So when a postman strained up a hill with sweat freezing in his eyebrows, it was often to deliver fish math. You ski alongside your companion, imagining the letters stacked inside, some tied with string, some folded into tight triangles, their wax seals barely clinging in the cold. There might be a letter from a bishop in Bergen chastising a priest for using the wrong hymnal, or a farmer's petition to repair a snow-damaged barn roof. Some messages are coded, often literally, written in clerkly shorthand so obscure that modern historians still struggle to interpret them. And yet, for all its dryness, there's something quietly heroic about this cargo. These weren't just boring papers, they were lifelines. A village might learn of new laws, tax changes, or even royal deaths by a single page passed hand to hand through the snow. A shipment delay might mean the fish don't sell, the taxes don't get collected, or the orphanage doesn't receive its monthly shipment of, not kidding, sackcloth and barley. Quirky tidbit time. Every so often, the mail included samples, swatches of cloth, grains in little pouches, even pickled vegetables sealed in wax jars, a kind of primitive Amazon with a strict no returns unless you're willing to ski back 200 kilometers policy. You reach another small rest spot, this one marked by an upturned sled that's been converted into a makeshift bench. Your postman buddy reaches into the bag and pulls out a scrap of paper, probably checking his delivery list. It's written in cramped, looping script, now slightly damp from snow. He frowns at one address, something about a smithy near the third birch stump after the bend. Precision was often a luxury in rural navigation. Some mail was personal, occasional letters between family members or more rarely lovers. But most Norwegians in remote areas were functionally illiterate at the time. They relied on the local pastor to read or write for them. And even then, many messages were dictated verbally and passed on by memory, a process that guaranteed at least a few letters got creatively interpreted. Historians still argue whether some routes were deliberately delayed by postmen who stopped to read particularly juicy messages. A few recorded complaints in the Royal Archives suggest that mail snooping was not entirely uncommon, especially in the lonelier legs of the journey. After all, who could resist peeking into a parchment labeled "Urgent Family Matter" after 3 days of staring at trees? You start off again, following the gentle downward curve of the path through a snowy hollow. The scent of pine sharpens, mingling with a faint metallic tang, probably from a nearby iron smelting site. Your boots creak softly. You're getting used to the rhythm now, and the mailbag feels a little lighter, even if that's just wishful thinking. Along the way, you pass a snow-covered milestone carved from stone. It's barely visible under the frost, but you can just make out a date, 1763, and the faint remains of a crown symbol. These were waypoints, not erected for travelers, but for bureaucrats to show they were investing in infrastructure. Still, they're handy when trying to avoid delivering fish invoices to the wrong fjord. Your postman pulls out a small bundle wrapped in linen. It's got a string tied around it and a note tucked inside. You stop and peer over his shoulder. It's a package of knitting needles bound for a woman named Ingrid, who apparently has very specific tastes and threatened to hex the sender if they're bent. Even tiny items like this mattered. In rural households where trips to market might happen once or twice a year, receiving a single useful object could be game-changing. The mail didn't just bring words, it brought tools, repairs, news of births, deaths, war, peace, and when the taxman was planning to arrive, sort of like a seasonal reality check wrapped in goatskin. Back on the trail, the snow thickens again. Trees close in, narrowing your path.
The only sound is the rhythmic swish of your skis and the occasional soft jingle from the strap buckles on your bag. The cold has a smell, clean, faintly sharp, like something metallic left too long in a stream. Somewhere behind you, a pine branch dumps its snow load and a quiet whoomph, and a raven caws once before launching into the sky. You think again about what it means to carry messages through snow like this. Every letter, no matter how dull, mattered to someone. Even the report detailing how many cows froze last winter, or the complaint about a tax collector who sneezed too loudly during Mass. And even if your job is to haul bureaucratic nonsense through a blizzard, there's something dignified in knowing that you're the link, that invisible thread that stitches people together over miles of white silence. The postman turns and nods. It's time to keep moving. The next delivery's just up ahead. Probably another fish invoice.
Section 5. You leave the quiet hollow behind and begin to descend into a shadowy stretch of forest where the trees grow closer and the light fades almost completely. The trail narrows, squeezed between frost-covered trunks, and the air grows heavier, not colder exactly, but stiller, like it's holding its breath. It's getting late, the kind of late where the sun gives up and slips behind the mountains without much ceremony. The snow glows faintly in the twilight, your skis now the only sound in this cold cathedral of trees. Welcome to the night shift. Just you, your tired knees, a leather satchel of civic memos, and whatever's making that crunching sound in the distance. Which brings us to one of the less charming aspects of early Norwegian mail delivery: wildlife. Nightfall on the postal trail wasn't just a time of beauty and stillness. It was when the forests came alive. Foxes, owls, and snow hares, sure, but also wolves. Lots of wolves. And on rare occasions, bears. And on one particularly legendary occasion, a moose with an attitude problem. Mainstream fact: while moose attacks are relatively rare today, in the 18th century, they weren't something you could brush off. Mail carriers often had to navigate deep woods where hungry animals didn't exactly respect government correspondence. There are several recorded incidents, some likely exaggerated, of postmen being stalked or even chased by wolves. One tale from a village near Vepsen describes a carrier who lit his own satchel on fire to scare off a pack. The mail didn't survive, but the postman did, and frankly, that's the better end of the deal. As you shuffle forward, skis muffled against new-fallen powder, your imaginary companion suddenly stops and raises a mittened hand. You freeze. From somewhere up the slope comes a deep, throaty huff, the kind of sound that can only mean one thing: moose. And not just any moose. This is the infamous sort that local legends talk about, the kind of beast that once supposedly blocked a postman's route for 3 full hours just by standing there and looking offended. Historians still argue whether these stories were meant to warn travelers or just amuse them around the fire. One popular tale involves a moose nicknamed Tore, who was known to charge sleds, lean on fence posts until they collapsed, and once allegedly chew through a letter containing a marriage proposal. Whether or not Tore existed, the fear of stumbling into the personal space of 1,200 pounds of antlered attitude was very real. Your postman companion slowly shifts course, leading you off the main trail and through a stand of younger pines. You breathe a little easier once the forest opens up again and the ominous snorting fades into the background. The stars are starting to blink awake overhead, small points of light scattered across the navy sky. You make camp briefly at a rest point, a half-frozen bench carved into a fallen log and a circle of rocks blackened from past fires. The postman tosses a few twigs onto a bed of old coals and lights them with a flint spark. The fire sputters to life, casting golden flickers on the snow. For a moment, everything feels safe and timeless. Quirky tidbit time. Many mail carriers carried small talismans or charms, woven from horsehair or carved from bone to ward off bad luck on the trail. Some believed a coin in your boot would keep wolves away.
Others swore by hanging a clove of garlic inside the mailbag. Just in case the wolves were also vampires. You sip something warm from a wooden cup, probably a broth or some herbal concoction brewed in the last village. It's earthy, a bit bitter, and tastes faintly of moss. But it helps. As you sit, you start to realize how solitary this job really was. Many mail carriers traveled for days without seeing another soul. Some carried journals, scratching their thoughts into notebooks with pencils carved from pine twigs. A few wrote poetry. And at least one man, known only as Old Lars, is said to have kept up a running conversation with a wooden spoon he named Captain Birch. You look around. The trees whisper softly in the wind, and your eyelids grow heavier. Maybe it's the fire, maybe it's the effort, or maybe it's just the deep, blanket-like silence that settles over the snow once the animals stop prowling and the last birds fall asleep in their nests. Historians still argue whether the loneliness of this job contributed to Norway's later literary tradition. Some scholars suggest that the long, isolated routes helped birth a unique national imagination, where nature, mythology, and melancholy combined into something quietly powerful. Others think the postmen just had a lot of time to think about fish and taxes. The fire burns low. The postman stretches out briefly, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket, his head resting on the mailbag. You lie back too, staring up at the stars and wondering how many thousands of nights just like this played out in snowy valleys across the centuries. Far away, a church bell chimes midnight, muffled, distant, and hauntingly slow. The mail will move again come dawn, but for now, in this quiet fold of the forest, time stands still. And if that moose comes back, well, maybe he just wants to hear how the letter ends.
It's hard to say what wakes you first, the brittle creak of frozen pine above you, or the vague, impolite ache in your knees. Either way, the sun's doing that thing it does in a Scandinavian winter, rising half-heartedly, like it regrets the decision. There's light, sure, but it's more of a glow, like someone lit a candle behind a frosted window. Your postman companion is already moving, stamping warmth into his boots, carefully packing the satchel of letters you both protected through the night. The fire's nothing but a puff of ash now, and your shared blanket smells like wood smoke and ambition. You're still tired. Of course you are. But there's a river to cross today, and in the 1700s, rivers aren't scenic photo ops, they're plot twists. The trail tightens as you descend into a shallow ravine, snow crisp underfoot, trees dripping occasional icicles onto your collar. The sound of running water reaches you first, muted but insistent, before the river appears, snaking across the valley like a ribbon of dull glass. It's mostly frozen, though you wouldn't call it confidently frozen. Mainstream fact, Norway's postal system in the 18th century relied heavily on rivers and fjords, which were traversed by boat in summer and by skis or sleighs in winter, assuming the ice held. There was no postal plan B. The government issued detailed seasonal routes, and if that meant tiptoeing across creaky ice river with 43 tax notices in your pack, so be it. You reach the riverbank where a faint trail cuts across the ice, marked by a line of bundled birch twigs stuck vertically into snow, like frozen exclamation points. These were known as viserstakker, or guide sticks. Local farmers or fishermen often placed them after testing the ice, sometimes by sending the family goat out first. Don't worry, the goats usually survived. Usually. Your postman glides forward, placing his weight carefully. You follow, resisting the urge to hold your breath because that would make it obvious you're nervous. The ice groans under your skis in that special way ice does when it's not entirely sure about your plans. You keep your eyes ahead, avoid any thoughts about the water underneath, and mutter a prayer to whichever minor Norse god handles bureaucratic crossings. You make it across, barely,
and haul yourself up the far bank, legs buzzing, skis heavy with crusted snow. The reward? A long, uphill climb through a forest of whispering spruce, their branches bent with ice. You're too relieved to complain. For now. Quirky tidbit. Postal carriers often carried thin iron spikes tied to rope, which could be used as emergency grappling hooks if they broke through the ice. Not to haul themselves out. No, that would be too convenient. These were for rescuing the mailbag. You, the human, came second to the tax records. Priorities. The forest thins again as you reach a shoulder of highland, where a small hut squats under a drift of snow. At first, it looks abandoned, but a wisp of smoke curls up from the chimney, thin and steady. You knock once, and a creaky voice bids you enter. Inside, the space is dim and warm, lit by a lantern shaped like a pine cone and smelling faintly of reindeer fat. This is one of the postal relay huts, unofficial, privately maintained, and essential. These cabins dotted the more remote routes, offering shelter, warmth, and sometimes tea made from whatever needles could be boiled without hallucinations. A gray-haired woman stirs something in a pot, humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a passive-aggressive lullaby. She says nothing at first, just ladles out a thick stew into a carved wooden bowl and slides it across the table. You nod your thanks and sit on a rough bench that's clearly seen generations of tired postmen come and go. Historians still argue whether these huts were formal parts of the postal infrastructure or simply community kindness masquerading as bureaucracy. There's little surviving documentation, but what exists suggests the government preferred to pretend these places didn't exist, possibly to avoid having to pay for firewood. You eat in silence, savoring the stew, which tastes mostly of root vegetables, salted fish, and a suggestion of shoe polish. It's delicious. Or maybe you're just that hungry. Your companion carefully checks the mail pouch, comparing its contents to a folded list he keeps in a beeswax-sealed pocket. A few letters are handed off to the hut keeper, who places them into a wooden box by the hearth. Quirky detail time. Some of these cabins doubled as informal bulletin boards. Inside, you spot an entire wall covered in paper scraps, notes from passing travelers, updates on trail conditions, and one slightly poetic rant about a missing mitten. This was pre-newspaper social media at its sleepiest. You linger only a little while, just long enough to thaw your fingers and let your knees remember what warmth feels like. Then it's back outside, where the snow has softened in the mid-morning haze, and the wind carries the far-off creak of trees readjusting their branches. It's not welcoming, exactly, but it is familiar. You take one last look at the hut. It sinks back into the hill like it was never there, disappearing behind you as the trail rises again. There's another ridge ahead, another slope, another satchel of mail just waiting to be wet, frozen, or pecked by overconfident grouse. And you just keep skiing. Because this route doesn't end here. Not yet.
Section 7. The snow shifts beneath your skis as you descend, slowly at first, the ground curling into a gentle slope that seems too peaceful to be part of the same brutal landscape you've just traversed. It's a soft reminder that, in Norway, nothing is ever truly easy. There's always another challenge on the horizon. You glide down the slope, muscles loosening with the motion, the fresh air cutting through your layers. The trees, now fewer in number, give way to open land, and the horizon stretches before you, pale blue and impossibly wide. The wind bites at your face, but it's not as relentless here. The storm from earlier has passed, and you can almost hear the land exhale in relief. For a moment, it's just you, the skis, and the hum of your breath. A perfect kind of isolation. But the silence doesn't last for long. The faint sound of something clattering in the distance pulls your focus back to the present. It's a distant sound, something metallic, something unmistakable. A sled.
You squint, tracking the noise, and soon enough you spot it. A two-horse sled cutting through the snow, guided by a pair of bundled postmen. They are traveling fast, carving a deep groove in the blanket of white, the sled's runners squeaking in protest as they slide across the frozen earth. It's a familiar sight. The sleds are often used in the more open areas where speed is of the essence. Mainstream fact: sleds were a crucial part of the postal system in areas where roads were either non-existent or too treacherous to navigate. They allowed postmen to cover long distances faster than on skis, though, as you know, a sled comes with its own set of challenges. Sledges had to be packed with care, and the horse teams had to be well trained to avoid getting stuck in deep snowdrifts. They say there was no faster way to feel like you might die from cold, exhaustion, and sheer terror than being in a sled during a snowstorm. You watch as the sled disappears into the distance, the rhythmic thud of hooves slowly fading into the white expanse. For a moment, you wonder if you're just part of a never-ending postal chain, a thread in the tapestry of this icy landscape. Quirky tidbit: the sleds had a special connection to the local communities. When one passed through, children would sometimes run alongside, waving and shouting greetings to the carrier. In many areas, these sleds also doubled as mobile offices of sorts. Inside, you could find stacks of tax records, village notices, and, occasionally, a kettle of warm soup shared by the team to ward off frostbite. As the sled fades from view, your companion gestures forward, signaling you to move on. The trail ahead is steadily rising again, up into a series of rolling hills. The pace shifts slightly, your skis cutting through the snow with a deliberate focus. The rhythm of the day has returned, and with it, the realization that you're nearing another section of the journey. You cross a small bridge over a frozen creek, its surface thick enough to support the weight of a deer, but still prone to shifting beneath the snow. The icy patches have a way of fooling you, turning the ground beneath you into a sudden surprise. It's a small but necessary bridge, a shortcut over a boggy patch of land that otherwise would add hours to the journey. The river crossings may be dramatic, but these little bridges are where most postmen trip. You've learned to tread carefully here, with one eye on the ground, checking the integrity of the ice beneath. It's all part of the rhythm, part of knowing where the land demands respect. Quirky detail: there's a superstition among postmen about these bridges. Some claim that every bridge has its own spirit, watching over travelers to ensure they cross safely. If you ever hear a faint whistle on the wind while crossing, it's said to be the bridge spirit wishing you well, or, alternatively, it's an Old Norse ghost laughing at your overconfidence. You laugh to yourself, though you're not entirely sure whether it's the wind or your imagination. Still, it's a comforting thought that someone, or something, has your back even when the journey feels never-ending. You cast the bridge and move into the next stretch of the trail, a series of gentle inclines followed by a wide valley. The snow is deep here, powdery in places, compacted in others. It's a quiet, rhythmic glide as you make your way forward, knowing the only thing that matters is getting to the next relay point where more letters will be waiting. You've been on the trail long enough to understand that this is what it's about. The never-ending cycle of delivery, no matter how difficult the terrain, no matter how far the distance. It's all about the mail. But today, the mail isn't the only thing weighing on your mind. It's the journey itself. The slow glide of skis over snow, the rhythm of the poles, the endless line of relay stations you will pass, the exchange of words between postmen and villagers, the momentary respite in the warmth of a tiny hut. the steam of stew rising in the air. These little moments make up the larger story, more valuable than any letter, more important than any official seal. Quirky trivia. Some postmen had strange rituals at these relay huts. Some would refuse to enter until they'd kissed the threshold, believing it would bring them luck for the next leg of the journey. One particular carrier, known as Jonas the Superstitious, was said to have carried a lucky rabbit's foot for over 20 years, though some were convinced it was just to make people laugh. He never missed a delivery. The landscape starts to shift again as you glide further into the valley. Ahead lies a larger stretch of wilderness. This is where you'll make camp for the night, though you're not sure if you'll find another hut or if you'll simply have to curl under the stars. Either way, there's a subtle comfort in the knowledge that another step closer to home is another step closer to warmth. The sun has sunk low now, and the world feels heavier, quieter, as night begins to crawl toward you, bringing a soft calm that makes the cold feel less like an enemy and more like an old acquaintance. You're ready for the next phase of the journey, but you know the last thing to do now is rest. Tomorrow, the trail continues. Tomorrow, the next letter. For now, though, the night is yours.
Section 8. The sky darkens quicker than you expected. You've learned by now that time in Norway's winter months works differently. The sun slides over the horizon like a worn-out coin, and within minutes the world has a deeper chill to it, one that clings to your bones even through the thickest layers. It's not quite nightfall yet, but the shadows are long and sharp, the snow picking up a silver sheen as the light fades. You press on, knowing the next relay station is within reach. It's not much further, a short slog through this next stretch of snowdrifts, and you'll be there. But in a landscape this vast and cold, distance is a deceptive thing. What feels like just a little farther could take hours depending on the wind, the snow, or how thick the frost clings to your skis. The stars begin to creep out one by one, as if they were waiting for the world to grow quiet enough to be noticed. The moon, just past full, casts a soft, bluish glow across the landscape, illuminating the ridges and valleys in that surreal way that snow-covered ground always does at night. It's beautiful, in a harsh, sharp sort of way, like a painting too perfect to touch, too fragile to last. You slow your pace, feeling the gradual ache in your legs. The work of skiing, it turns out, is mostly the art of quiet persistence, making it from one footstep to the next, from 1 hour to the next. Even the rhythmic sound of your poles and skis starts to feel like a lullaby. In moments like this, you could almost forget you're traveling through a frozen wilderness at the mercy of the elements, almost forget the ancient Norse gods of frost and wind watching overhead, waiting for their chance to play tricks on you. Mainstream fact. One of the more curious aspects of these postal journeys was that they didn't just transport letters. They also carried rumors, whispers from one village to the next, passing gossip from person to person like the seasonal wind itself. As a result, postmen became a kind of living, breathing news network. Even the smallest piece of mail, an official notice about taxes, a land grant from the king, would set off waves of discussion among the villagers. Sometimes the news was less about what was written and more about how it was delivered and by whom. Suddenly, you're shaken from your quiet reverie. A dark figure looms ahead, standing still against the backdrop of the snowy landscape. For a moment your heart skips, a postman or something else. The figure doesn't move, standing perfectly still, like they're waiting for you to get closer. You stop in your tracks, eyes narrowing. The wind's picked up a little and the cold starts to seep through the seams of your coat, but the figure doesn't budge. Curiosity mixes with a hint of caution, and you take a slow step forward, then another. As you get closer, you realize it's not a person at all, just a large, lumpy snowbank with a few branches sticking out of it, shaped just so. You chuckle at yourself, though the tightness in your chest doesn't quite ease. Out here, you can't afford to let your guard down. Quirky tidbit. Some postmen swore by the occasional snowman sightings during their travels, and for good reason. The landscape, with its endless stretches of white, had a strange way of playing tricks on the mind. On several occasions, carriers reported seeing what they thought were people in the distance, only for them to be the random convergence of snow drifts, trees, and a few random bits of wildlife. It's one of the many oddities that made these journeys so mentally taxing, especially during the long, isolated stretches between relay stations. In fact, some postmen, after years of lonely service, began to jokingly refer to these snowmen as their companions. The figure vanishes as you move past, its form dissolving into the empty expanse of snow. Your pulse slows back to its normal rhythm, and you breathe out the tension that had crept into your body. It was just the cold playing tricks on you, nothing more. You're now on the final stretch toward the relay station, the last push before you can rest for the night, although you already know that rest will be a relative term. Even in the safety of a cabin or a hut, sleep is fleeting out here. The cold, the wind, and the isolation always find their way into your dreams, no matter how much warmth the fire offers. As you approach the hut, a soft light flickers from the window, like a welcoming beacon in the night. The smoke rises lazily from the chimney, a sign that someone's inside, probably the relay keeper or a fellow traveler. At the very least, there'll be warmth, and that's all you can really ask for. You knock, not wanting to startle anyone inside. The door creaks open slowly, revealing a fire blazing in the hearth and a small figure hunched over a table, scribbling something with a quill. The keeper looks up, nods a greeting, and gestures you inside. You duck through the door, shaking the snow from your coat and boots, and step into the warmth. The firelight flickers off the wooden beams, casting soft shadows across the room. Quirky detail. It's a bit of a ritual at these relay stations to offer something to a weary traveler, especially one who has made the long trek through the wilderness. Some keepers would offer a bowl of hot soup, while others preferred to offer stories of their own, tales of odd encounters with wildlife, strange weather patterns, or, in the case of one particularly eccentric keeper, a long-winded tale about the time a reindeer got caught in a fence and had to be coaxed out with wild herbs and a tune sung in a language nobody could recognize. It was always a mix of comfort and absurdity, all part of the charm of the journey. You sit by the fire, letting the warmth soak into your bones while the keeper gets to work organizing the next round of letters. They seem to move with practiced efficiency, a quiet hum of routine that blends into the background of your thoughts. There's a feeling here, a kind of calm purposefulness that is almost addictive. You know that in a few hours you'll be back on the trail again, but for now, this tiny moment of peace is more than enough. You close your eyes, letting the fire's crackling rhythm lull you into a quiet space. Tomorrow you'll ski through more snow, and more stories will be passed along the route. But for night, you're here, in this quiet, warm cabin with the glow of the fire keeping the darkness at bay.
Section 9. The fire continues to crackle and pop as the keeper settles in beside you, and the warmth of the flames feels like a luxury you're not entirely accustomed to. After hours of skiing through the biting cold, the contrast between the frosty outdoors and this intimate warmth inside is almost surreal. The room is small but cozy, nothing more than a few wooden beams and a collection of mismatched furniture, but it's enough. The hearth does its work, filling the air with a soothing hum. You stretch your legs out toward the fire, the muscles in your calves beginning to unknot after their long day of exertion. The keeper doesn't say much at first, but you've come to appreciate the quiet. Sometimes the stillness between words is the most peaceful part of these nights. That, and the occasional crack of wood splitting in the fire. As the keeper goes to work sorting mail, you glance over at the stack of letters resting on the rough-hewn table. It's hard not to imagine the lives that those pieces of paper represent. Some are probably mundane. Farm orders, legal notices, things people in these small, remote villages would never dream of leaving the safety of their homes to carry themselves. But then there are those letters you can't help but wonder about. The kind of letters people don't just send lightly. The ones tied up with secrets, passions, or heartbreak. The ones that must be hand-delivered with the utmost care. Maybe one of these letters carries someone's last goodbye. You shake your head, trying to rid yourself of the weight of that thought. It's easy to get lost in these stories, to start imagining who wrote what and why. But in the end, you're just the messenger. Just another figure gliding through the snow, collecting letters to be passed along. No different from the keepers who take them in, or the next postman who will carry them further on their journey. Quirky tidbit. There's an old tradition among postmen, particularly in more remote areas like this one, where they would sometimes come up with imaginative explanations for the letters they delivered. The keepers, especially, were fond of inventing stories about the people behind the letters. For example, one particularly fanciful keeper in a nearby village was famous for telling everyone that a certain letter belonged to a Norwegian prince on the run from a political plot, only to reveal it was actually a simple farmer's tax return. It was all part of keeping the spirits of the journey alive and adding a little color to the otherwise drab task of sorting through endless parcels. A few moments pass, and then the keeper places a letter in your hands, a fresh, wax-sealed envelope. You look down at the delicate pressed seal, noting the intricate designs. For a split second, you're reminded of how much care people once took in the things they sent, the time they invested in the formality of it all. "Careful with that one," the keeper says with a wink. "That's a message that's got some weight behind it. A little bit of mystery wrapped up in that seal." You raise an eyebrow, intrigued, but the keeper just laughs softly and goes back to his work, shaking his head. The mystery of the letter is left hanging in the air, a reminder that even the simplest deliveries could have unknown, deeper stories tied to them. But for now, you push it aside. There's no time for speculations. You're here for rest and, if you're lucky, a few hours of sleep. As the keeper begins to tidy up, preparing for his own rest, you notice the dimming light outside. The moon is now a thin crescent, hanging low in the sky, like a quiet watcher keeping its distance. It's too early for true sleep, but the body craves the kind of rest that only comes with warmth, familiarity, and the promise of a gentle night. The warmth of the cabin wraps around you like a blanket, and the tiredness in your limbs pull at you. It would be so easy to fall asleep right here in this chair, the fire lulling you into dreams. But there's work to be done. The post still needs to be sorted, and the first leg of tomorrow's journey must be planned. Tomorrow, it starts again. The skis, the snow, the endless cold. And you, as ever, will be the link between the places, carrying these letters across lands and histories, stories and lives. It's an important job, though it's not one you ever talk about much. This is the life you chose, or the life that chose you. Quirky trivia. The work of a postman in the 18th century could be grueling, but it also came with unexpected perks. Many postmen and keepers were treated with great respect by the villagers, who would offer food, shelter, and even gifts to those who made the long trek through harsh conditions. One well-known postman, nicknamed Tor the Traveler, was famous for his ability to exchange letters for fresh bread, handmade wool socks, and, in one remarkable case, an entire dinner of reindeer stew, simply for delivering a series of important documents. The job of a postman wasn't just about logistics, it was about becoming part of the community, even for a short time. As you settle into your seat by the fire, you hear the
Section 10. The fire dims slightly, its warm glow now more of a gentle ember. Outside, the snow continues to fall, soft and steady. It's as if the world is holding its breath in this little cabin, a stillness that stretches into the night. The only sound is the occasional crack of the firewood shifting, a brief, sharp noise that seems too loud in the otherwise peaceful silence. You feel the weight of the day pulling on your body, every muscle sore from hours of skiing through the thick snow. Your legs, heavy and tired, ache in that deep, satisfying way that lets you know you've truly exerted yourself.
And then there's the cold, the kind that seeps into your bones, even when you're wrapped in thick layers and surrounded by warmth. It's a reminder that, no matter how much shelter you find, the wilderness is always just beyond the walls, waiting for you to venture back into it. It's easy to get lost in this quiet, to let your mind wander. The crackling fire seems to encourage it. In a place like this, where time seems to slow down and the night stretches on forever, you start to think about all sorts of things. About your journey, about the countless others who have made it before you, each one carrying letters across this endless expanse of snow. Their stories are all woven into the fabric of this land, connected through the shared purpose of carrying messages. Some of them, you imagine, were simple exchanges between loved ones. Others, perhaps, contained life-altering decisions, secrets, or promises. You let the thought of these stories fade as you watch the fire burn lower, its warm light flickering in the small room. Your eyelids grow heavier, the warmth beginning to lull you towards sleep. You know you should probably get ready for bed, but the peace of this moment, with the fire and the quiet, feels too rare to disturb just yet. In a way, it feels like a gift, a brief pause in the relentless march of time and travel. Mainstream fact: the postman of this era didn't just have to battle the elements, though that was often the most taxing part of the job. There was also the challenge of navigating through the remote, almost mythical landscapes of Norway. Some postmen would travel through deep forests, thick with trees and tangled undergrowth, while others would have to cross vast mountain ranges that seemed to stretch on forever. To make the journey, they relied heavily on the stars for navigation, as well as the few permanent landmarks scattered across the land. Some would use old Viking maps passed down from generation to generation that were written on scraps of hide or wood. These maps, while not always accurate by modern standards, were enough to guide a determined postman through the wilderness. As your mind begins to drift, you realize the keeper has been watching the fire as well, his face soft in its glow. There's a certain timelessness in this scene, something universal. The world moves forward, but moments like this, quiet and simple, seem to suspend time, making everything else fade into the background. It's hard to tell how long you've been sitting here, lost in your thoughts, when the keeper speaks again, his voice quiet but steady. "Tomorrow's journey will be longer," he says, breaking the silence. "But it'll be worth it. There's a village at the end of the trail that has a feast waiting for us." You smile, grateful for the small comfort of knowing that tomorrow's hardships will be softened by a warm meal at the end of the day. It's a reminder that, even in the coldest, loneliest stretches of your journey, there are always moments of warmth and human connection waiting at the end. Quirky tidbit: the idea of feasts and celebrations at the end of a postman's journey was not uncommon. Many times, the villagers knew when a postman was coming, and the promise of a new letter or an important delivery would be cause for celebration. In some cases, entire villages would come out to greet the traveler, offering food, drink, and hospitality in exchange for the latest news from the outside world. Postmen became local celebrities, their arrival marking a rare occasion for socializing and entertainment. The keeper rises from his seat, stretching with a soft groan. "You should sleep soon," he says, his voice thick with fatigue. You nod, standing as well, feeling the stiffness in your body as you move. It's time to retire for the night, to find a place to rest and prepare for the next leg of your journey. The keeper gathers his belongings and walks toward a small cot in the corner where he'll sleep. You, too, find a spot near the fire, wrapping yourself in a blanket and settling down for the night. The warmth of the flames seems to follow you as you curl up, pulling the blanket tighter around your shoulders. In the stillness of the cabin, with the snow falling softly outside and the fire burning low. Section 12. The morning light filters softly through the cabin's small windows, casting pale shadows on the walls. The fire, though still warm, has reduced to a low glow, its once vibrant flames now just a quiet memory of the night before. It's early, too early for most, but the postman's rhythm is a different kind of clock. The journey calls, no matter the time of day or the temperature outside. As you open your eyes, the first thing you feel is the weight of the cold air creeping in through the cracks of the cabin walls. You stretch your arms, the stiffness from yesterday's skiing still lingering in your limbs. It's a good kind of ache, though, the kind that tells you you've worked hard. You're alive. Your body still remembers the motions, the effort, the rhythm of the skis cutting through the snow. Outside, the snow continues to fall, lightly at first, but you know it will only build throughout the day. The tracks you'll leave behind will quickly be covered, just like the ones from yesterday, the day before that, and all the days before. It's a cycle. Snow falls, the earth sleeps under a blanket of white, and then a new journey begins. There's no end to it, not really. There's only the next step. As you sit up, the keeper is already awake, moving around the cabin with quiet purpose. He's got a warm mug of tea in his hands, steam rising in soft tendrils. You don't say much, there's no need for it. In a place like this, words are a luxury. The cold, the snow, the skis, they all have their own kind of language. And right now, the language of the morning is simple. Get ready, gather your things, and head out. But before you do, there's a small, almost forgotten ritual. The keeper hands you a piece of bread, freshly baked, warm, and slightly crisp around the edges. It's a comfort, and you take it gratefully. He doesn't say anything about the bread. It's just what's done here. A small gesture of hospitality that's shared between travelers and strangers alike. Mainstream fact. In many northern communities like this one, the postman wasn't just an essential part of the postal system, they were also a kind of hero. The journey they undertook was grueling and dangerous, with steep mountain passes, deep forests, and extreme cold. Still, the postman persevered, ensuring that the letters, often the only means of communication, reached their destinations. It wasn't just the physical hardship that made these men heroes. It was the role they played in keeping the community connected. They were the lifeline between far-flung villages, the thread that wove everything together. As you finish your bread, the time for hesitation is over. The gear has been packed, the skis are waiting by the door, and the snow continues its soft fall outside. The keeper stands, pulling on his thick gloves, and gestures for you to join him. Together, you step into the cold, the world around you a soft blur of white and gray, the snow falling heavily now, as if the sky itself is trying to pull the earth into a quiet embrace. You slide your skis onto the soft snow, the cool bite of the morning air filling your lungs. The path ahead is long, but you're used to that now. It stretches out before you, disappearing into the mist of falling snow. The silence outside is almost deafening, broken only by the rhythmic sound of skis cutting through the snow. The keeper is ahead of you, moving swiftly and silently, and you follow in his tracks, gliding over the smooth surface with practiced ease. Quirky tidbit. One of the quirks of skiing in such remote areas was that the postman would often leave strange markings or small objects behind, not as a message to other postmen, but as a way to mark their own passage. It could be as simple as a small pile of rocks stacked in a particular formation, or a single pine branch tucked into the snow. Some postmen even left small notes tied to trees hidden in the snow for the next traveler to find. These little signs became a kind of unwritten language, a way for postmen to communicate with each other without saying a word. The snow falls harder now, and the trail ahead becomes increasingly difficult to follow. But you don't mind. It's part of the journey. The cold, the snow, the challenge, it all feels strangely comforting in its predictability. With each turn of the ski, each glide over the snow, the world feels smaller, more manageable. The weight of yesterday is forgotten, replaced by the rhythm of the skis, the quiet whisper of snowflakes falling from the sky. As you move forward, the only thought in your mind is that there's always another village, another letter, another story waiting at the end of the trail. The life of a postman is a journey without a final destination. It's the constant movement, the perpetual link between people that makes it meaningful.
You pause for a moment, watching the keeper ahead of you, his figure becoming more distant as the snow continues to fall. You wonder where this journey will take you next, what letters will be.
Section 13. The day unfolds slowly, much like the journey itself. The sun, though barely visible behind the thick cloud cover, casts a dull light that doesn't seem to brighten or darken. It's as if time is caught in a strange limbo, where the snow falls and the world moves forward, but the passage of time itself is muted. You glide forward, the skis beneath you making a soft swish-swish sound as they carve through the snow, the only sound to break the vast stillness of the wilderness. The path is familiar, yet each step feels fresh, like you're discovering the landscape anew with every movement. There's something peaceful about this steady, endless rhythm of traveling through snow, day after day, letter after letter. The steady beat of your skis on the snow, the repetitive nature of the task, seems to quiet your mind, letting it drift as you move through the quiet world around you. The thoughts that linger are soft, unhurried, like the snowfall itself, slowly building without haste. As you look up, the landscape is almost surreal in its simplicity. The snow-covered trees lining the path, the distant mountains barely visible through the thick fog, the occasional rustle of an animal's movement somewhere in the woods. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also harsh. The snow is relentless, the cold unyielding. There's no room for hesitation out here, no room for doubt. You keep moving, knowing that every glide of the ski, every breath you take, gets you closer to your destination. The keeper moves ahead of you, his movements fluid and sure, a steady figure in the distance. You're not in a race, but the rhythm of his skiing pushes you to keep pace, to follow in his tracks. It's comforting in its way, this quiet camaraderie. You're not alone out here, even if the snow and the cold make it feel that way. There's something reassuring about knowing that, despite the isolation, you are part of something bigger, a network of postmen, each one carrying messages across this vast snowy expanse. Mainstream fact: postmen in Norway were often trained in specialized techniques for skiing in the snow, ensuring they could navigate even the most difficult terrain. The long skis they used weren't just for speed. They were necessary to keep them afloat on the soft snow, which could easily swallow up someone wearing shorter skis or walking without them. Their skis were often made of solid wood, hand-carved and carefully maintained to endure the harsh conditions. While ski design has evolved significantly over the years, these early skis were remarkably efficient for their intended purpose, allowing postmen to travel across long distances without sinking into the deep snow. The landscape around you continues to shift, each stretch of the path offering a new view, a new challenge. It's easy to get lost in the landscape, to let the vastness of it swallow you up. The snow keeps falling, thicker now, and the world around you seems to fade into a sea of white. The trees, once tall and distinct, are now just dark shapes against the white sky, their branches heavy with snow. The wind picks up, sending a fine mist of snowflakes into the air, obscuring your vision just enough to make the world feel even more distant. As you ski forward, the silence becomes almost oppressive. It's a quiet that you get used to, but it's also a silence that makes you realize just how isolated you truly are. There are no other sounds, no other people for miles and miles, just the soft sound of skis moving across the snow and the occasional gust of wind. Even the animals seem to have retreated, leaving only the soft crunch of snow underfoot and the distant murmur of the wind. Quirky tidbit: the silence in these remote areas wasn't just a natural feature of the landscape. It also led to some odd local beliefs. For instance, some villagers believed that the constant snowfall and silence had magical properties, that the snow was a way to mute the world and protect people from the harshness of the outside. In some areas, it was thought that the snowflakes carried the whispers of ancestors, and that anyone who spent enough time out in the snow would begin to hear those voices. Postmen with their long journeys were sometimes believed to be able to hear these ancient whispers, though no one ever confirmed it. It was one of those small, strange beliefs that kept the mystery of the wilderness alive.
As the day stretches on, the world around you begins to blur, the snow falling ever more heavily, the cold creeping deeper into your bones. The weight of the journey settles on your shoulders, but you push forward, knowing there's a village waiting at the end of the trail. It's a familiar destination, one you visited before. The small wooden buildings nestled against the mountainside, the smoke rising from chimneys, the faint smell of food carried on the wind. Despite the exhaustion that's starting to creep in, you feel a faint flicker of excitement. You're almost there. The end of the trail, the village, the people, it's all within reach now.
Section 15. The evening passes slowly, each moment a soft ripple in the pool of the day. The warmth from the fire in the inn's hearth lingers in the air, a quiet hum that surrounds you as you lie in bed, your body finally allowed to rest. The snow continues its gentle descent outside, the world bathed in a soft, wintry glow. There's something comforting about the stillness, the way the cold keeps the world in a constant, suspended pause. You can hear the quiet rhythm of the snowflakes as they land, creating a soft, steady patter against the window. It's a sound that seems to draw you deeper into relaxation, each soft tap a reminder that time is slowing down. The day is over, and the journey has come to its end, at least for now. There's no rush anymore, no pressing urgency to get back out into the snow. For the first time in days, there's nothing to do but rest, and for the moment, that feels like enough. Your mind drifts slowly, the events of the day replaying themselves in your thoughts, but it's not the details that stand out. It's the feeling, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that today you've connected with people, that you've played a part in the flow of communication and connection. It's easy to forget how small actions, even something as simple as delivering a letter, can hold so much significance. But out here, in this quiet, isolated place, it feels important. It feels like the world matters, even when it seems distant and remote. The room is warm, and the bed is soft, but you find your thoughts turning back to the journey itself. The skis, the snow, the keeper ahead of you, the steady, unhurried rhythm of the work. There was something meditative about it, wasn't there? Something soothing in the act of moving through the snow, the world quiet around you, the only task being to glide forward. It was simple, but it wasn't easy. The cold, the isolation, the weight of the letters you carried, all of it was part of something larger. It was a job that demanded patience, resilience, and a quiet sense of purpose. In the soft glow of the inn's candlelight, your body begins to relax fully into the warmth of the bed. You close your eyes, listening to the muffled voices of the villagers downstairs, the faint crackle of the fire, the quiet of the snow. The room feels cocooned, tucked away from the harshness of the world outside. And as you drift deeper into slumber, you know that tomorrow will bring another journey, another village, another story to tell. But for now, there's only this moment of peace, this quiet rest. Historians still argue whether the role of the postman, especially in these remote, snowbound villages, was purely a logistical one, or if it had a deeper significance. On the surface, it seems like just another job, another mundane task in a world full of them. But in the context of these villages, isolated for months at a time, the postman was something more. He was the thread that connected them to the world, the tangible link between the people who lived in these quiet, snow-covered landscapes and everything beyond. The letters he carried were not just pieces of paper. They were lifelines, whispers from the outside world, keeping the villagers tethered to something beyond the isolation. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers, especially the elderly, believed that the postman was like a messenger of fate. They thought that if they received a letter, it meant that the universe had decided to send them some form of news, some signal, something to shape the course of their life. It wasn't just the letter itself, but the timing of its arrival, the very act of receiving it, that carried weight. For the postman, these beliefs could be uncomfortable. Imagine knowing that something as simple as a letter could hold so much importance in someone's life. But it also meant that they were respected, even revered, for the work they did. As the hours pass, the night grows deeper, and the snow continues its steady fall. The world outside is a soft blur, a pale wash of white that blends into the night sky. The inn is quiet now, with only the occasional murmur of voices or the creak of the building settling into the cold. There's no hurry anymore, no rush to get things done. Tomorrow will come soon enough, but for now, all that matters is the stillness, the quiet comfort of being in this moment. The snow, the skis, the journey, they are all just memories now, fading into the background as you sink deeper into the comfort of rest. And as you drift further into sleep, the last thought that crosses your mind is simple. Tomorrow is a new day, and the world, in its quiet, slow-moving way, will continue. The night draws close, wrapping its blanket of snow around the village, and with it, your thoughts grow softer, your body lighter. The journey will always be there when you wake, always waiting, always continuing, but for now, rest. The snow, the skis, the village, and the letters are all held in the warmth of your mind as you slip gently into sleep.